Hunters surrounded a canine German Shepherd puppy. Then something heartbreaking happened. He was just a tiny canine puppy, too young to understand the danger closing in. His ears perked up at every sound, his little paws trembling as a circle of hunters drew closer, guns in hand. He had escaped a van meant to transport him to training, but now he was lost in the wild, alone and scared. What happened in those final moments would break anyone's heart and reveal a truth about courage and innocence that no one saw coming. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss the stories that remind us of the power of loyalty, love, and second chances. Now, let's begin. The pine forest was quiet. Too quiet for a puppy bred to be part of a world full of sirens, commands, and discipline. Dusty was only 5 weeks old, a black and tan canine German Shepherd pup with oversized ears and legs that still stumbled over roots. He had no badge, no collar, and no idea how far from safety he had wandered. All he knew was the sound of barking, chaotic barking, before the crash. The van had flipped. It was supposed to be a routine transport. 6 canine pups on their way from a breeding facility in Georgia to a specialized training center in North Carolina. A young officer had fallen asleep behind the wheel, and in an instant, metal twisted, crates shattered, and the woods swallowed the smallest one. Dusty. He had run through instinct more than fear. His crate had cracked open during the accident, and the smell of blood, smoke, and gasoline drove his tiny legs into the underbrush. He didn't stop running until the sounds disappeared behind him. Now, the forest was all he knew. Tall trees that whispered in the wind, cold mud that clung to his paws, strange chirps, shadows, and silence. And somewhere far behind him, footsteps, not the kind he knew, the heavy boots of handlers, voices full of purpose and kindness. These were slower, softer, predatory. Hunters. Dusty had been wandering for 2 days. He had tried to chew bark, drank from a puddle, slept curled beneath a log, shaking. His fur was matted with leaves and dew. The strong, proud bloodline in his bones didn't help his hunger. He missed the warmth of the litter, the steady heartbeat of his mother, the smell of safety. On the morning of the 3rd day, the wind shifted. He heard them before he saw them. Crackling branches, voices, then the click. It echoed, sharp and unnatural, the sound of a gun being readied. Dusty's ears perked. He stood, wobbling on weak legs, and looked through the trees. A man in camouflage, then another. They weren't looking for game. They were tracking something. Him. The forest had signs posted every mile. No trespassing. Private hunting grounds. This part of the woods wasn't meant for strays. And to some, a dog was just another moving target. Dusty tried to run. His body screamed in protest. Every step was slower. His tail tucked, his breathing shallow. And still, more voices behind him. Laughter. Cruel, amused. They had spotted him. "There he is!" The first shot rang out. Not close, but close enough to make birds take flight from the treetops. Dusty yelped and darted into a thicket, heart racing. His tiny paws stumbled over rocks and roots. He scraped his side on a broken branch. Pain shot through him. But then, another sound. A human voice, high-pitched, frightened. "Stop it! Don't shoot!" Dusty froze. A girl? She appeared from the tree line. Maybe 10 years old, wild red curls bouncing, eyes wunged with panic. "That's not a coyote," she yelled. "It's a puppy." One of the hunters barked back. "He could be rabid." "He's just scared." Dusty didn't understand the words, but her voice, there was something in it. It wasn't the voice of dominance. It was the voice of care. The same kind that once rocked him to sleep. The kind that said, "Stay close. You're safe now." The girl stepped forward slowly. Dusty's legs buckled. He collapsed in the leaves, too tired to run. The hunters lowered their guns reluctantly. One of them swore under his breath and turned away. And then, the girl knelt beside him. He didn't move, couldn't. She touched his side gently. He whimpered, but didn't resist. "It's okay," she whispered. "I've got you." And in that fragile moment, a child became a rescuer. A tiny pup became a survivor. But what neither of them knew was that Dusty's story, his legacy, was only beginning. Because heartbreak still waited just around the bend. Ellie Montgomery had never planned to be in those woods. Her grandfather's cabin sat just beyond the ridge, and her parents had insisted she spend a few days there while they sorted things out back home. Grown-up stuff, whispered arguments, and locked doors. But Ellie didn't like staying inside. The forest was quieter than her house had ever been, and at least the birds didn't pretend everything was okay. She had wandered farther than she meant to that morning, chasing a butterfly through the trees when she heard the gunshot. It echoed so loudly she dropped her little canteen and froze. Then she saw him, the puppy. At first, she thought it was a fox or maybe a baby wolf, but when he turned toward her with those wide, dark eyes, she knew he was a dog. A German Shepherd. Young, shaking, barely able to stand. She had shouted before she could think. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but fury. Why would anyone shoot at a puppy? Now, crouched beside him in the leaves, she could feel him trembling. His ribs were showing. His fur was sticky in spots where he'd scraped himself. He whimpered softly, his little tail twitching with uncertainty. "I'm not gonna hurt you," she said, her voice gentle as her fingers moved slowly toward his paw. "You're safe now, I promise." Behind her, one of the hunters muttered, "You can't just take in a stray. Might have rabies." Ellie didn't even turn around. "Then I'll take him to the vet." Her tone left no room for argument. The older man sighed and waved a dismissive hand. "Suit yourself, kid, but don't come crying if he bites." They walked off, their boots crunching through the forest floor. Ellie barely noticed. She was too focused on the pup now, pressed into her lap like a broken branch. His breathing was shallow, his eyes closed. She carefully lifted him, cradling his body against her chest. He was warm and fragile. She didn't know much about German Shepherds, but she'd read enough books to know this one was meant for something big. Canine dogs were heroes, protectors. But this one had been abandoned before he could even try. "I'm gonna call you Dusty," she whispered, "because you're covered in it, and 'cause you're tough." He didn't respond, but she imagined he liked the name. It took her nearly 30 minutes to carry him back to the cabin. Her arms ached, but she never stopped. Her grandpa wasn't home when she arrived. He had probably gone into town, but she had the spare key. Inside, she laid Dusty gently onto an old wool blanket by the fireplace. She filled a bowl with water. He drank, slowly. Then she opened a can of stew and mashed some bits into smaller pieces. He nibbled. Ellie sat beside him, brushing leaves and mud from his fur with an old dish towel. "You're gonna be okay," she said, even though she wasn't entirely sure. "You just need a little time, and someone to believe in you." That night, she slept on the floor beside him, and as the fire cracked softly in the hearth, and Dusty's breathing deepened into something steadier, safer, Ellie didn't know that what she had done would set off a chain of events far beyond that forest. Because someone else had seen her carry that dog home. A neighbor. And the story of a young girl rescuing a helpless pup was about to spread. But not everyone who heard it would be kind. And not every truth stays buried forever. By morning, the entire town knew about Ellie and the German Shepherd puppy. It started with Mr. Langston, the neighbor who lived 2 cabins down. He saw her returning from the woods, cradling something against her chest. From his porch, he thought it was a rabbit or maybe a wounded fox, but when he squinted harder through his binoculars, he saw the truth. "A stray dog?" he muttered, frowning. By noon, his version of the story had twisted. Ellie Montgomery dragged a wild dog into the cabin. Looked like a police mutt. Shouldn't be messing with animals like that. Could be dangerous. By the time it reached the cafe in town, it had become, "That Montgomery girl took in a savage-looking canine. Might be one of those dogs that attacked those campers last year." And like wildfire, the whispers spread. Back at the cabin, Ellie had no idea. She had spent the entire morning cleaning Dusty's fur, snipping away matted knots with a small pair of sewing scissors, and warming milk over the stove. The puppy was starting to respond. He'd managed to lift his head, even tried to follow her with his eyes. But something was off. A tag. She noticed it when she went to toss the blanket he was curled in. Tucked into the frayed fabric near his belly, a piece of nylon, faded, torn. She gently pulled it loose. It wasn't a collar, but part of a harness. It read, "Property of North State Canine Unit, in training." Ellie blinked. "You're a police dog?" she whispered. Dusty let out a weak, short bark. As if answering, she looked down at the words again, her stomach tightening. This puppy wasn't just lost. He had escaped something important. Somewhere someone was missing him. She didn't know what to do. Tell someone? Call the local sheriff? But what if they took him away? He was safe here. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, Dusty was safe. She wouldn't let anyone take that from him. Not yet. She folded the strap and tucked it under the pillow. 2 hours later, her grandfather came through the door, winded from his trip into town. "Ellie?" She looked up from the floor where she was gently stroking Dusty's fur. He froze in the doorway. "What in the world?" "His name is Dusty," she said softly. Her grandfather approached slowly. "That's a shepherd." "I know. Where'd you find him?" "In the woods. Some hunters were trying to shoot him. He's hurt. I brought him back." He exhaled through his nose and rubbed his beard. "Ellie, the town's already talking." She blinked. "What?" "Langston saw you, and people are saying all kinds of things. That he's a stray, dangerous, maybe even stolen." "I didn't steal him." "I know that," her grandpa said, kneeling beside her. "But this is a small place, honey. People love to stir things up. If he's a canine, that makes this complicated." "I found a tag," she said quietly. "It says he's from North State's Canine Unit. But he's just a baby. Someone lost him. Maybe no one's even looking." Her grandfather sighed. "Then we need to find out. If he belongs to someone, they deserve to know." "But what if they don't care?" Ellie whispered. "What if he was thrown out? What if they gave up on him?" They both looked down at Dusty. He was sleeping again, one paw twitching in a dream. Her grandpa finally said, "We'll do this right. I'll call my old friend at the sheriff's office, quietly. We'll find out where he came from." Ellie nodded. "But we don't let him go unless it's safe. Promise me that." Her grandpa looked at her. "I promise." But as he stepped out to make the call, Ellie stayed beside Dusty, unaware that danger was coming, because someone else had seen the tag. And they weren't looking to return Dusty. They were looking to silence what he might remember. That night, the cabin felt different. The wind pressed harder against the old wooden walls. The trees whispered like they were warning something Ellie couldn't quite hear. Even Dusty, curled up beside the fireplace, stirred more than usual, ears twitching at distant tones, a low growl rumbling in his tiny chest whenever a floorboard creaked. Ellie lay on the couch, pretending to sleep. But she was wide awake. Her grandfather had called someone at the sheriff's office that afternoon. He said it was just to ask around quietly, but Ellie had seen the tension in his eyes. He knew more than he was saying. She looked down at Dusty again. His breathing had grown steadier over the past day. His scratches were healing. He had even started eating solid food, slowly, carefully. But what worried her most now weren't the wounds on his body. It was the fear in his eyes every time the wind howled. Something bad had happened before she found him. Something that lived inside him still. Down the hill, 2 black trucks parked just off the main road. No plates, no lights. Inside one of them sat a man in a navy jacket with a stitched badge that read Private Security. But this wasn't any official unit. The other man beside him was on his phone. "You sure it's the same pup?" "Positive," came the reply. "The girl has him. Someone spotted the old training harness on a photo her neighbor posted." The man with the badge leaned back, annoyed. "That harness should have been destroyed after the crash. If this gets out..." "It won't," the driver said, starting the engine. "Let's just take care of it before anyone starts asking questions." Back at the cabin, Ellie finally dozed off, the book she was reading slipping from her hand. Dusty's eyes snapped open suddenly. His ears pricked forward. Something had changed. Outside, gravel shifted, footsteps. Quiet, slow, measured. Dusty stood. He wasn't strong yet, but instinct made his legs move. He crept toward the door and let out a sharp bark. Ellie jolted upright. "What is it?" Then, a knock. 3 slow taps. She froze. "Grandpa?" she called. No answer. Dusty barked again, louder, his fur bristling. His body still trembled, but there was something different now. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something stronger. Protection. Ellie crept to the window and peeked through the curtain. 2 men, black jackets. No badges she recognized. One of them held a folder. The other, a baton. Her heart pounded. Something wasn't right. She grabbed the cordless phone and dialed her grandfather's number. No answer. Then she called 911. The line rang once, then died. No signal. Outside, the knocking grew louder. "We're here about the dog," a voice called. "Open the door." Dusty stood in front of her now, growling. Ellie whispered, "Stay with me." The front door handle jiggled. They were trying to force it. She backed us up, pulling Dusty gently with her. Her voice trembled. "We have to hide." She led him toward the storage room at the back of the cabin, where her grandfather kept his hunting gear. They squeezed inside behind a stack of firewood and pulled the door closed. Then, glass shattered. They were inside. Ellie covered Dusty's mouth gently as he whined, his body trembling against hers. Footsteps creaked across the floorboards. The men spoke in low voices. "Find the dog. Check the bedrooms." They were getting closer. Then a sudden bang. The front door flew open with a force that shook the walls. "Hands up." It was her grandfather. And behind him, 2 deputies, guns drawn. The cabin exploded with noise. Orders shouted. One of the intruders tried to run, but a deputy tackled him to the ground. The second man froze, hands raised. Ellie burst from the storage room, Dusty in her arms. Her grandfather rushed to her, eyes wild with worry. "You okay?" She nodded, clutching the puppy tight. "They came for him. I think they were trying to take him back." One of the deputies approached her gently. "Ma'am, we think this dog might have come from an illegal training site, shut down months ago. If he survived the crash, he's the last witness." Ellie looked down at Dusty. His eyes were tired but fierce. "Then we protect him," she whispered. Because now she understood. Dusty wasn't just a puppy who got lost. He was a survivor, and someone had tried to erase that. But she wouldn't let them. The next morning, Ellie woke to the sound of distant sirens echoing through the hills. Dusty was curled up at her side, still sleeping, though one of his ears twitched with every new sound. His body was stronger now. The tremble in his legs was gone, replaced by the cautious steadiness of a dog who had learned that safety can vanish in a second. Downstairs, her grandfather was on the phone again, his voice calm but tight. Ellie could only catch fragments. "No collar, but we recovered the harness. Yes, it matches the serial. Right? Still a pup. But alert. Okay, I'll tell her." When she came down the stairs, he looked at her the way you look at someone who's about to learn something heavy. "Ellie, sit down." She sat, Dusty padding over to rest his chin on her foot. He sighed and said, "They found the wreckage, a few miles north of where you found him. It was an unregistered transport van, belonged to a private canine breeding company that was operating without a license." Ellie's eyebrows knitted. They weren't official? No, not even close. And from what the deputies found at the site, it wasn't just illegal, it was cruel. Overcrowded crates, no records of vaccinations. They were selling untrained dogs to security contractors overseas. Dusty wasn't being trained to protect people. He was being trained to attack. Ellie stared at Dusty, her chest tightening. "But he's just a baby." "Exactly," her grandfather said, "which means he probably hadn't been corrupted yet. And when the van flipped, he was the only one smart enough, or lucky enough, to escape." Ellie swallowed hard. "And the men last night?" "Cleanup crew. Not from the government. From the same people who ran the breeding site. They wanted to erase everything, including him." Dusty nuzzled against Ellie's leg, sensing the emotion in the room. She looked down at him and whispered, "You were never meant to be a monster, were you?" Her grandfather leaned forward. "We've got a decision to make." Ellie tensed. "They're not taking him." "No," he said quickly. "I mean the real people, the good ones. A canine rescue organization from Charlotte heard about him. They've got resources, real training, real care. They think he's special." Ellie's throat tightened. "They want to adopt him? They want to train him right, help him be what he was meant to be, and then place him with a handler who treats him like family." She looked down at Dusty again. His brown eyes stared back, steady and calm. "But I'm his family." "I know, kiddo. And maybe that's what they'll see too. But if he stays here, he may never become what he was born to be. Not just a survivor, a protector." Ellie stood and walked outside with Dusty trailing beside her. The morning was crisp. Mist clung to the trees like breath on glass. She sat on the porch, Dusty leaning against her side. "Do you want to go?" she asked softly. "Do you want to leave all this and go be a real canine?" Dusty tilted his head. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. Then, without warning, he stood up and barked. Once, loud, proud. It wasn't fear, it wasn't pain, it was purpose. She smiled through the tears forming in her eyes. "I guess that's your answer." That night, the rescue team arrived. 2 women in navy vests, one of them a retired canine handler named Sergeant Nora Reeves. She knelt in front of Dusty without hesitation, letting him sniff her glove. He didn't pull away. "Smart boy," she said, ruffling his ears. "Gentle, too. He's got something rare." Ellie stepped forward. "Promise me something?" Nora stood. "What's that?" "That wherever he ends up, he gets love. Not just training, not just a badge. Love." The woman smiled. "I promise. We only send them where they'll be family." Dusty turned back to Ellie one last time. For a second, he hesitated. Then he ran into her arms. She held him tightly, sobbing softly into his fur. "You'll always be my hero," she whispered. And when he finally stepped into the rescue van, she stood tall, stronger than she ever thought she could be. Because sometimes love means letting go so they can become everything they were born to be. 6 months later, the world knew Dusty's name. He wasn't just a Canine German Shepherd anymore. He was Officer Dusty, the youngest dog ever accepted into the North State Canine Honor Program. But it wasn't just his skill that caught the world's attention. It was his story. Major news outlets ran headlines like, "From Forest to Frontline, Abandoned Canine Puppy Becomes a Hero." Pup rescued by girl in woods now protects thousands. But for Ellie, who clipped every newspaper article and watched every segment on the tiny TV at her grandfather's cabin, Dusty was still just the pup who once shivered in her lap, unsure of the world. And though he was now learning to track missing persons, disarm dangerous suspects, and even detect explosives, what he was best at was love. She hadn't seen him in person since that night he climbed into the rescue van, but every month, Sergeant Nora sent updates, photos, handwritten notes, and little voice memos of his progress. In the most recent one, Dusty had passed a test meant for older, seasoned dogs. "He picked up the scent in under 90 seconds, Nora said, her voice brimming with pride. "He's not just fast, he's focused. But I can tell there's something deeper in him, like he's doing all this for someone." Ellie knew exactly who that someone was. At the training center in Charlotte, Dusty woke each day before the sun. His coat gleamed now, his muscles firm, his stride smooth and confident. Yet even in his power there was a gentleness, a patience the other dogs didn't always show. While others barked and leaped against their kennels at feeding time, Dusty waited, calm, watchful. The trainer said he had an old soul, but Nora knew the truth. He remembered a girl with wild red curls who carried him out of the woods, remembered her soft voice, the way she whispered promises while he lay broken beside a fire. He didn't know her name, but he carried her scent like a badge. Then came the invitation. Nora sat with him on the floor one evening, his head resting on her lap. "Guess what, boy?" she said, scratching behind his ears. "You've been requested. Special assignment. Not a deployment. Something better." Dusty perked up. She smiled. "We're going back to the mountains. Someone's been waiting for you." It was a crisp fall afternoon when the white van rolled up the gravel path toward the Montgomery cabin. Ellie was on the porch, her homework open, but forgotten on her lap. She heard the tires first, then the soft creak of the cabin door as her grandfather stepped out behind her. Expecting company. She shook her head. No. But when the side door of the van slid open, her heart stopped. Dusty leapt out, not even waiting for command. He bolted up the steps like no time had passed at all, his paws thundering against the wood, and within seconds, he was in her arms. She dropped to her knees, tears spilling from her eyes as she buried her face in his fur. "You came back," she whispered. Dusty licked her cheek, then nuzzled into her neck like a puppy again. Sergeant Nora stepped out of the van, her hands on her hips. "He was offered a permanent station here," she said with a smile, "with your local sheriff's department. And they made one condition." Ellie looked up, confused. Nora nodded. "That you be his handler." Ellie's mouth fell open. "Me? But I'm just a kid." "Not anymore," her grandfather said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're the reason he's who he is." Nora knelt beside them. "You rescued him, Ellie. Now let him protect you. This town, your home, we'll handle the training. All you need is what you've already given him." Trust. Dusty barked, as if agreeing. And in that moment, everything came full circle. The girl who saved the pup would grow up beside the hero he became. Autumn came in golden waves that year. The trees around the Montgomery cabin burned with color. Deep reds, fire orange, glowing yellow. The town of Mill Creek, once known only for its fishing lake and forgotten mining roads, had become something else entirely. It was now known as the home of Officer Dusty. Everywhere they went, people stopped Ellie and her German Shepherd partner. Little kids waved when they saw them patrol the school grounds. Veterans saluted. Even the mayor had once leaned down, scratching Dusty behind the ears as he said, "I've never trusted a deputy more in my life." Ellie, now nearly 12, wore her junior deputy patch with quiet pride. She still went to school, still helped her grandpa chop firewood on weekends. But everything had changed. She wasn't just a girl anymore. She was Dusty's handler. They had grown together. Every command she gave was gentle but firm. Every mission they completed, tracking a lost hiker, chasing off a trespasser, comforting a shaken-up child after an accident, was another stitch in the fabric that bound them tighter. What they shared wasn't just work. It was love. Still, not everyone approved. There were always voices in the background, whispers that she was too young, that a dog with Dusty's potential should have gone to the big city, to a real handler. But Dusty made the answer clear every time. He only listened to Ellie. He only responded to her touch, her words. One evening, months into his service, a call came over the sheriff's radio that sent a shiver through the whole town. Unit 4. Possible burglary in progress at the old mining warehouse. Suspects may be armed. The sheriff turned to Ellie. "We can call backup." She looked at Dusty. He was already at the door of the cruiser, ears alert. "No," she said. "We've got this." They drove in silence, the trees rushing past the window. Ellie's heart thudded hard, but her hands were steady. Dusty rested his chin on her knee during the ride, sensing the tension. She whispered, "Whatever happens, we stay together." The warehouse loomed like a ghost. Shattered windows, rusted doors, darkness thick around the edges. Ellie clicked the flashlight on and stepped out. "Stay close," she told Dusty. They moved as one, silent, deliberate. The air inside was cold, metallic, sharp with the scent of oil and dust. Then, a sound. A cough. A figure darted across the far end of the room. Dusty growled. Ellie called out, "This is Deputy Montgomery. You're trespassing. Step out with your hands up." No answer. A shadow moved toward them. Then it happened fast. A man lunged from behind a stack of crates, shouting something Ellie couldn't understand, holding what looked like a pipe. Before she could scream, Dusty launched forward. His bark was deafening. In a flash, he was between Ellie and the attacker, teeth bared, stance low. The man froze, eyes wide with panic, then dropped the pipe and bolted through a side door. Ellie called, "Stay, Dusty!" And he did, panting, watching, guarding her. The sheriff's unit arrived minutes later and apprehended the man hiding in the brush outside. No one was hurt, but everyone knew if Dusty hadn't been there, things would have ended differently. That night, as Ellie knelt beside him in the living room, brushing dirt from his fur, she whispered, "You saved me." He rested his head on her shoulder. "You always save me," she added. A week later, they stood together in front of the entire town at the annual Harvest Festival. The sheriff cleared his throat, then handed Ellie a plaque. To Officer Dusty and Deputy Ellie Montgomery, for courage beyond their years. The crowd erupted in cheers. Dusty barked once, tail wagging. And in that moment, under a sky of stars and strings of warm yellow lights, a small-town girl, and her rescued canine pup stood hand in paw, a living reminder of something the world often forgets, that heroes aren't born, they're built, through pain, love, second chances, and the ones who never give up on us. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Because sometimes the greatest love stories are written in paw prints and courage.